What is going on, everyone? Is Nick from Breaking the Clutch, and tonight, April 17th, Sketch has just dropped the preliminary patch notes that will be coming out with the DLC Leader Colony. Let's just jump right into it. This is pretty much everything that we can expect to be changed now. Just as a disclaimer, anything here can be adjusted. It is not official, but this is pretty much what we can expect. So let's jump right into it. We've got leader Anders. Anders has some cheesy strategies with players turtling around their base using lure beacons from Kodiak and siege cannon shells to hold up armies that should have destroyed her. With the reduction in Kodiak fire rate and the reduction in spawn sentinel patrol duration, this should stop the cheese. We've made research and development better by affecting the unit specific upgrades too. This will give Anders a big advantage in getting better units faster than other leaders. The Retriever Sentinel wasn't very cost effective, so that had an increase to general damage and survivability. That is absolutely crucial because the siege ability with Anders was extremely overpowered, and yes, it could slow down armies immensely. If you watched Udpu and C-Mitch when we did the tournament videos, that was the kind of strategy they were using, not to turtle their base or anything like that, but to be the aggressors. So to see that slowed down a little bit is definitely a step in the right direction. And then they also helped her out by giving her units faster, bigger, better units faster. Moving forward, Arc Cleansing, its cooldown increased by 9%. Arc Defense, level 1 cost increased from 225 to 225 to 360, 225. So we've got a bunch of adjustments here on the cost side of things. Cooldown increased by 20%. Retriever Sentinel cooldown increased by 9%. Let's see if there's anything in here. Retriever viability. Okay, so and damage is increased with the Retriever Sentinel. This was kind of the thing with the Retriever Sentinel that I didn't understand why anyone would use them. It just was a very weak unit. But to see the damage increase by 20%, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out with the new patch. Now, Anders Research and Development now affects unit specific upgrades like UNSC Marine Grenades or Scorpion Canister Shell. Lure Beacon Spawn Sentinel patrol time reduced from 6 to pretty much cut that one in half. Leader Power Selection. Turret Drop switched with Lotus Mines. Interesting. Lotus Mines are now level 2 power, and Turret Drop is now level 3 power, or level 3 leader power. That's interesting. So we're going to probably see, if we continue to go down the patch notes, we're probably going to see turret drops be utilized more in the middle and back end of the game rather than the front, because as of now we've got a lot of people rushing with turrets, and it is really affecting the game, I think, in a negative way. Moving on from Anders, it looks like Anders, just to speak on that real quick, is getting a nerf with with turtling, but it's getting a buff with some of the bigger units like the Retriever Sentinel, and that should be able to get faster units out than any other leader. So that's interesting. Pretty much what we're going back to is the Halo Wars 1 Anders, where she was able to upgrade units faster. So we'll see how that one plays out. Anders could still be a very viable choice. Cutter. Archer missiles, a little bit of adjustment there. One thing to note, the cooldown increased by 17%. Pelican gunship cooldown increased to 9%. And orbital battle group increased by 9%. The cooldown increased by 9%. Nothing really affecting Cutter right here. You'll still pretty much be able to play him as you have as a counter unit to Locust and an ability to get Marines and Cyclops out quickly to stop those rushes. So Cutter's still very viable according to this patch right here. Alright, now a lot of you guys have been asking about Isabel. You wanted to see buffs from Isabel because right now she's a terrible leader, or at least before the patch. Let's look at what Sketch had to say about Isabel. Isabel was suffering from a low pick and win rate. For one of the most potentially interesting leaders, this simply could not do, and we all agree with that. We've really pumped up her abilities to let her stand amongst the other leaders. For example, Ghost in the Machine is now a very scary ability. Fancy losing control of your units for 13 seconds? No, me neither. By using holograms to bait out enemy leaders and armies, Isabel has the power to run riot like no other leader. Wow, very interesting stuff here. So you can take armies away from your opponent. I don't know what the extent of that is, but at least for 13 seconds. That could be absolutely crucial if, for instance, you are rushing with Isabel and the enemy player has a Locust. So say you're on the enemy side attacking with Isabel and the enemy player is defending with Locust. If I take over the Locust and then attack the main base with the units I already have, for 13 seconds the base is gone. You guys know how Locusts are. We'll see if they get a little bit of a nerf towards the bottom of this, but as of right there, Wow, what an interesting play by for Isabel, I should say. Ghost in the Machine, well, with that, they obviously increased Ghost in the Machine's cost. Now controls all units for a flat 13 seconds. Absolutely crazy. Okay, so Isabel's definitely going to have to be utilized in gameplays coming up. Area of effect increased by 12%. Okay, so it's all units within a range. Heavy metal, level 1 duration increased by 25%, level 1 damage resistance increased from, okay, so we've got a bunch of just damage increase across the board is what it looks like, and damage resistance. Okay, so heavy metal, viable option for Isabel right there. And anyone who's trying to follow along, I'm just going over the key things that I spot here. Make sure to check the description. Everything, all of these preliminary patch notes are going to be in the description for you if you want to follow along. I'm just going to cover some of the main things so we're not here all night, but you guys do know what's coming in the patch. So Hollow Decoy, cooldown decreased by 13%, and the costs are being reduced across the board, and the radius is being increased across the board. Okay, that's obviously to play into the effect that you can pull out enemy players, you can drag them out from their base, hopefully trying to bait and switch them kind of thing. Mac Blast cooldown increased by 17%. Cost, everything's increasing on the Mac Blast side of things, and the damage is also being increased, which is pretty interesting. We might see a Halo Wars 1 type Mac Blast. Moving forward, leader power selection, turret drop switch with Lotus Mines. So we're seeing this across the board. Turret drop is now a level 4 leader power, and Lotus Mines are 2. So they're switching turret drop with Lotus Mines from what I'm seeing across the board. Interesting. I do agree with that. Turret drops were extremely overpowered in how you could just rush an enemy base in the very early beginning of the game. You could double drop a turret and then send Marines out, and the bases would pretty much drop very quickly unless the enemy player was ready for it. But even then, it was very difficult. Let's move on to none other than Sergeant Forge. Heavy metal, we saw this with, I believe it was Isabel. So just pretty much same thing going on right here. Duration reduced, but duration is increased by 25% in level 1. Damage resistance increased from units 60% to units only taking 40% incoming damage. So heavy metal is going to be a very viable option across the board, it looks like, with most of the UNSC leaders. Scatterbomb, level 1 cost increase. Yeah, Scatterbomb's a very good play. Only thing with it is it's just a little slow to drop. Once you see where it first hits, the back end of it, you can move your units out of the way. I could see why this is increased, but I don't think it's too big of a deal. Income strike warning time reduced from 2 to 1.5. Yeah, I guess we'll have to see how that plays out, but I don't know if that's going to be anything too drastic to deal with. Ooh, here we go. Moving on to Kinsano, and that looks like it's it right here. We've got Kinsano and nothing for the other leaders as of yet. So Kinsano was well received by the community with a high pick and win rate. We've had to push back turret drop to a bit further back in the leader power. Radial for a few leaders, it's just too strong early in the game. Absolutely. We've made some fixes to the bugs that were making her redline ability perform much better than it should have done. Yeah, there was a lot of glitches with redline where you could permanently have it throughout the game. Glad to see that that's fixed. With this and a few other issues fixed, Kinsano will settle in amongst the other leaders instead of burning them alive. Well, that's, I think her point was to burn the enemy alive. Firestorm Battle Group cooldown increased by 9%. Kinsano's Inferno cooldown increased by 10%. It's going to take a little bit longer to get the Inferno back, which is probably a good thing. Inferno is an extremely deadly. I'm not going to say overpowered because Eradication's overpowered. Looking across the board, it's a very deadly leader power, and I'm glad to see that it's just tweaked a little bit. Initial damage reduced by 16%. Yeah, that's fine, because most of the damage for Kinsano or Inferno is when units stay on the fire, so that's where you're really getting a lot of your damage from. Redline damage bonus reduced from 10 to 8, just slightly there. Napalm missiles, we've got a cooldown increase by 18%, and then it looks like everything's increased across the board for napalm missiles. I was not a fan of napalm missiles. Again, a little slow to drop, but I guess if you can drop them on a base, that's probably the best thing to do. Let's see. Leader power selection, turret drop swapped with heat of battle. I don't know if I agree with that one. Turret drop swapped places with heat of battle. Heat of battle is a very good play. Okay, Ooh, all right, he's continued it. I guess he ran out of text, so we are not even close to done, guys. Halfway through. Here we go. Decimus had the same issue as Isabel, a low pick and win rate. This combination tells us that we need to do something to Decimus to make him a competitive leader. This pass has really given us a boost to his combination of buffs and effects, making the final combination of an army affected by Killing Frenzy, Siphon, and Fury a scary prospect. Decimus is a very aggressive leader and needs to be played aggressively to make the most of his abilities. Oh boy, here I don't even know. We're gonna have to just do an in-depth look across all the leaders now and figure out what's going on. Killing Frenzy, duration reduced from 15 to 6, damage dealt modifier from 5 to 50. Wow, okay. That's a huge increase right there. Siphon, percentage increase. So Siphon's going to be increased across the board, and it looks like Fury's going to be increased. Yeah, Fury's increased all across the board. Health drain from 30 to 50. Um, wow. Okay, so Fury is a very viable option as well. Again, check the patch notes if you want to look more in depth about this stuff. It's pretty much an increase across the board from what I'm seeing. Vortex Lightning cooldown increased by 14% and max speed increased by 14%. We're seeing with Vortex Lightning increase across the board on that as well. Yeah, pretty much an increase. Glassing Beam. Now, I don't see a lot of players using Glassing Beam, so I'm not quite sure if this is the right call to increase, but we'll see how that plays out. I'm sure they've tested it in the background, but I'm not seeing a lot of people using Glassing Beam, and it looks like they increased the cost of it across the board, and cooldowns also increased by 17%. If you're noticing, a lot of these leader powers are getting a cooldown increase of X amount of percent. They're trying to slow down the amount of leader powers that are being used in the game. Decimus drop. Cooldown increased by 9%, health increased by 120, damage per second 50%. Yeah, okay, so Decimus is getting a buff all across the board. It's going to have to be reassessed. He's probably going to be a very viable rush leader now, so that's good to see. Maybe a rival to Kinsanu for the banished side. Atriox is performing well with the top strategy, making use of his invulnerability style powers. Whilst now still valid, the strategy will require a little more thought and planning with an overall reduction to the duration that his troops are invulnerable / not dying. Okay, yeah, we saw that one coming. Eradication was a very effective base sniping tool that wasn't a whole lot of fun to play against. With the combination of leader powers coming online a little later and the specific changes to Eradication, this shouldn't be as widespread of an issue. Yeah, like I stated earlier, Eradication was the most overpowered leader ability in the game. Yeah, even Inferno doesn't even compare to Eradication. Eradication will literally rip everything off of a base and leave the base itself half shields. No one wants to play with that. That's just, I mean, no, everyone wants to play with it, but no one wants to be against that. It's a terrible, or it was a terrible issue, and I'm glad that they're fixing it here. So Unbreakable for Atriox, cost increase, duration reduced. So they're kind of nerfing him a little bit here. Dying Breath, cooldown increased by 50. Time that units stay alive decreased from 5 to 4 seconds. So you've got just a second is a lot in this game, especially in an RTS. That extra second can win you the game, and that loss of a second can maybe lose you a lot of your units, especially with Dying Breath. Eradication, obviously, cooldown increased, reduced damage to buildings by 1/10, and then cost increase. Yeah, we expected that. Invulnerability for Atriox Bulwark, duration from 2. Yeah, so they're just nerfing Atriox all across the board. Even Glassing Beam got an increase with Atriox from what Decimus from what we saw, so nothing new here. Atriox Chosen Sun changed to a 20% slow. Changed to a 20% slow. Am I reading that wrong? Okay, so they just slowed down the stun charge. Oh boy. Moving on to Shipmaster. Please tell me nothing too bad happened here. Alright, Displacement was extending games in a very powerful tool in the right hands, whilst still as useful as before. Players will need to think about exactly where they want to drop the power as the cooldown is a lot longer. Yeah, I'm fine with that. Displacement is extremely powerful, but the quickness and how quickly it was coming back, you were able to just throw units across the map, and then as soon as they got back to you, it was like halfway recharge. So that makes sense right there. No worries on that. Cost increase from 300 to 500. Yeah, that's fine. Cooldown increased by 100%. Holy smokes. That might be like a minute and a half, 2 minutes now for displacement to come back to you. Yeah, we'll have to see how that plays out. Mass cloaking increased by 11%. Tactical gateway, which I don't see used too often. But then again, I'm not in the late game that often. But that's totally fine. Tactical gateway, yeah, 11%. Glassing beam, we saw this across the board. Spirit support, cost decreased from 850, 375 to 800, 300. So just a slight tweak there, and it now drops off 2 times veterancy, 1 engineers instead of 2 veterancy, 3 engineers. Fine. Probably for the best. A lot of people were abusing spirit support, especially when they were rushing bases with Locust. Oh, there's the Locust right there. Speaking of them at the bottom, let's go ahead and start with the generic at the top. I do apologize. This is a lot of patch notes. I hope you guys are staying with me on this. Again, reminder, patch notes in the description if you want to follow along. All right, generic, fortify base upgrades. Bases were essentially out buffing units through fortify upgrades. Yeah, you don't say. This leads to long matches and difficult base assaults. So with the change, players should find it slightly easier to attack enemy bases defended by turrets. Been asking for that one for a while, so thank you for that. Affects all UNSC and banish. Buff to building turret HP reduced. Yeah, they're reducing the strength of a base and turrets. That's fine. Hopefully they didn't overdo it. We'll have to see when the game how the game plays out. Command XP. The XP rewarded for building a new mini base were too high. Yes, they were, leading players to farming XP by building lots of mini bases. It also led to ultimate powers coming online before they really planned them to. This should pace out gameplay a bit more, allowing players to really feel the differences in army compositions and unit upgrades before the top tier players become powers come online. Yeah, there was a lot of issues with people just building bases and destroying them, and they were getting their leader power as quick, or their leader powers much quicker than other players. It's a very cheese move, and yeah, I'm glad that they fixed it. XP for new buildings, mini bases reduced by 50%. Ooh, interesting. XP level boundaries changed so that leveling up and getting leader points takes a little longer. All right, let's jump into it. We're dealing with the units now. Locust, basic damage reduced by 11%, speed reduced from 11 to 9.5. Locust now reduced damage versus air units. That should have been the case from the beginning. Locust now reduced damage versus anti-vehicle counter units. Yeah, unfortunately, that should have been the case as well. Nothing too severe here with Locust. Yes, basic damage is reduced by just about 1/10. I wouldn't stress about that. Maybe you just have to focus more on upgrading your vehicles now instead of just utilizing Locust at their basic form. So nothing too worried about right there. Let's just keep an open mind with a Locust. Wraith cost increase. Okay, so the previous patch they increased or they buffed up the Wraiths and Scorpions, and it looks like they are now increasing the cost just slightly, probably as a reflection of that. Plasma cannons damage reduced by 6%. Yeah, so they're just fixing up, they're bringing the Wraiths and Scorpions back down a little bit. Or, ooh, I should say just Wraiths, because Scorpion got a canister shell increase by 30%. Interesting. Jackrabbits. Ooh, here we go. Healing drone delay before healing increased from 4 to 10 seconds. Okay, let me read that one more time. Healing drone delay before healing increase from 4 to 10 seconds. So this is probably for the best. So what this is telling me is that when you are rushing with Jackrabbits, you now have to pull your units back pretty far before they get a heal. You can't just sit, you can't just move one out from the base and then have it heal up within just a couple seconds. Now it's going to take 10 whole seconds. That can change a lot of things, especially if the player who is being attacked as turrets, they can do a lot more damage, and the Jackrabbits again will slow down their ability to get healed. Alright, costs increase just slightly, probably won't affect too much in the game, just slow some things down if anything. Scorpion canister shell increased by 30%, we just talked about that. Turret drop, cooldown increased by 13%, and of course it's increased across the board, that cost that is, and turret drop weapon now does reduce damage versus structures. Whew, all right, so turret drop got a bit of a nerf right there. That's fine though. They were being abused. Kodiak's rate of fire reduced by 1 second. Damage adjusted to compensate. Nothing too big there. As a reminder, these changes are subject to change and are currently slated to go live with the release of the next leader colony. Whew, guys, oh my goodness, that was all of the patch notes. Specifically dealing with the leaders, units, bases, stuff like that. Uh, Let me know who you guys think. Who are the winners and who are the losers of this new patch, especially if it drops as is. I would suggest that Isabel is a big winner. Decimus is a big winner. Maybe we saw a little bit of a nerf with Anders, and potentially we saw a big nerf with Atriox. I think everyone else kind of stayed around their mark. Shipmaster, Cutter, Kinsanu, they're probably sitting around the same. Forge, Mm, I don't know if he's viable still. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Are you excited for these patches or these patch notes to go live? And again, who do you think the best leader from each side will be coming out from this patch? Thank you so much for watching, and hope you guys have a great night. And let's have some fun with this new DLC later coming out later this week. See ya.